hope we can all take a look at Austin's past and maybe look at some of the stories that have been forgotten, look at some of the ways that maybe that people have been forgotten.
I just want to honor my dad. He was a driving force in my life. He was a man of faith, and I just want to honor my dad's legacy.
Austin was a real game changer for me because it literally put me into a community of very high caliber musicians.
It shares a story, some nostalgia of grandmothers who, did lots of creative things. They didn't have a lot of education, but they knew what to create in order to create healing.
For the most part, I think I can be around. I hope I can be around for a little bit longer. I want to be around a little bit longer for my grandchildren.
I'm Jennifer Sanders, and thank you so much for joining me to honor Black history, mind, body, and soul. Let's start our evening here at Oakwood Cemetery, where there are thousands of stories that really continue to shape the city of Austin into what it's become today. But much of that history, especially in the historic colored grounds, is buried in unmarked graves. A new project, though, calling for descendants, could change everything. The hallowed grounds of Oakwood Cemetery spanned about 40 acres and hold more than 23,000 stories.
I first came out here to find my great-great-grandfather.
Including the story of Greg Farrar's family.
That moment when I kind of found them, it was like, here are your roots.
He's talking about his 8 ancestors buried on what's known as the historic colored grounds, the segregated section of Oakwood.
We consider this sacred space.
Farrar is a descendant of Reuben Shannon Lovingood, the first president of Samuel Houston College, now known as Houston-Tillotson University.
He worked to basically build up the school for the next 16 years, and a lot of times at the expense of his health and his well-being.
That love and sacrifice for education lives through Farrar. He spent countless hours doing genealogy research about his family. And then he decided to dig a little deeper, just to help others who may have ancestors here. There are Buffalo soldiers buried in these graves, prominent Black doctors and educators from East Austin. But in the sections that look like open grass-covered spaces, those are actually unmarked graves, leaving so many stories untold.
You tend to only see what your eye can see, and you might not actually realize what's beneath the surface.
In 2020, he helped audit more than 5,000 records of people buried across the grounds. He then used ancestry, census data, and death certificates, all to discover a little more about each person. He researched nearly 3,000 burials in the historic colored grounds. But many people buried in this section have few to no records. This research, though, will hopefully change that.
It actually starts to slowly piece together their life. And so I'm helping out with the genealogy side of it, and then also helping to assist with the oral history interviews that we have with any descendants that come forward.
It's part of a new project launched by Oakwood, calling for descendants of color of those buried here. Many are Blacks, Native Americans, Hispanics, and even poor strangers who were just passing through Austin. Some may have had a small wooden headstone or even a cross, but it simply didn't stand the test of time.
What is right here tells the most.
Oakwood's museum site coordinator, Jennifer Chenoweth, says they know the least about these groups.
We do have some markers that are kind of tantalizing clues to their lives' history. But if we don't really know from their descendants and family members what their lives were like, all we know is what's on the headstone and written in a few poorly recorded records.
She and Farrar have already started meeting with descendants. Some are giving oral histories, photos, or even documents that will help preserve their family heritage. These family members will help imagine a digital 3D model of what this space would look like if unmarked graves had a headstone. There would also be stories of the men, the women, and the children, all buried in this area.
We can interpret this space with a digital lens so that you could see it through your phone, you could see it on your computer from far away. You could feel like you visited the cemetery.
To become a repository of family heritage, remembering the past and changing the future for descendants like Farrar.
We have this chance to look at some of their stories, kind of bring them back to life and acknowledge them, maybe in a way that they were never acknowledged at the time that they were buried.
Coming up, spreading hope and healing during the longest goodbye. But first, making Black history, the original L.C. Anderson football team of East Austin. They were champions but did not get the recognition deserved decades ago. The Yellow Jackets won 4 Prairie View Interscholastic League state championships and played in the state championship game 7 times during 1940 to 1961. But the athletes on those teams were never given championship rings and were not formally recognized for their accomplishments until this month. 82 years later, players got custom championship rings paid for by donations.
It's something that they realized that they never had before, and nobody knew it but people in East Austin. And finally, somebody came along and did something about it.
A formal proclamation from the Travis County Commissioner's Court recognized the players for their wins, determination, and dedication to the community. The original L.C. Anderson was the only high school for African American students in the Austin area, producing prominent leaders in East Austin and beyond. For many Black elders in Austin, memories abound as they walk the streets of their community. But for some, those memories slowly fade away as the years pass. That's why 2 women are using their voices and their experiences to help with that.
Isn't it a beautiful day?
She's 81 years old,
Who would have thought?
but not many people can keep up.
In February, no less.
With Netherland Coleman, her goal is to walk about 12,000 steps a day.
Sometimes I go under, but most of the time I go over. I think that gets me by.
And so does this.
It's a slow moving disease. At least for me it was.
She was evaluated by a doctor after she started noticing problems with her memory and eventually parts of her speech. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, a disease that took her mom.
She passed away in 1998.
But memories of her mother, her family, and friends line the walls of Coleman's bedroom.
This is my son when he got married.
She can tell you who, when, and where they were taken. She still drives her car and remains active each day.
The strangest thing about this disease is I feel fine, except I just cannot remember a whole lot of stuff.
Since her diagnosis 9 years ago, she's made it her mission to share her story to help others.
The support group is needed.
Just like Melanie Nash, a community educator and faith outreach representative for the Alzheimer's Association.
My dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease with Lewy body dementia.
Her father, a lifelong educator who inspired so many, later died. But his legacy lives on through Melanie.
When I was going through the thick of it, I just said, if I only had this information.
That's why she's launching an Alzheimer's educational series, as well as support groups next month in East Austin churches, like here at St. James Missionary Baptist Church. It'll help caregivers, those with the disease, and others who need help navigating the longest goodbye.
Because our community is disproportionately likely to experience this at some point in their life, you need to be able to recognize the symptoms.
According to the Alzheimer's Association, more than 6 million are living with the disease. Whites make up much of that number, but research shows that Blacks are at a higher risk and less likely to see a healthcare provider for diagnosis or treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Oftentimes, it's due to systemic barriers in healthcare.
Stigma prevents a lot of people from seeking healthcare and even going to the doctor because they're afraid of what they might be told.
Alyssa Aguirre is the Assistant Director of Dementia Care Transformation at UT's Dell Medical School. She too has lost family members to the disease, but says there's still hope after diagnosis.
I've worked with so many individuals who have mild cognitive impairment or early stage Alzheimer's disease. Some of them are still working, still driving, volunteering, and active in their community.
Netherland Coleman, even after 9 years with the disease, is an example of that. For her, she says early detection was key, which could help her be around for her 3 grandchildren.
One is at college, freshman in college. One is a sophomore in high school, and one is in 5th grade. So I would like to be able to see them, but I don't think I'm going to be able to make it for that last one. I'm still hanging in. So for the most part, I think I can be around. I hope I can be around for a little bit longer.
The Alzheimer's educational series will kick off in March, and the support groups will follow a short time after. We've posted all of this information as well as some helpful resources on KXAN.com. Up next, the nostalgic sights and sounds of culture and love at the Texas Farmers Market. But first, making Black history. Paying homage to one of its earliest Black students, the University of Texas at Austin has purchased and restored a historic commercial building designed by John Saunders Chase. Chase was the first Black student to graduate from the School of Architecture and the first licensed Black architect in the state of Texas. The building will host programming that leverages UT's resources to preserve East Austin's history and culture and amplifies community advocacy. The official launch is in April. Black farmers and Black-owned businesses are usually underrepresented at farmers markets across the nation. But the Texas Farmers Market, which operates here at Miller as well as Lakeline, where we'll go in a second, is working to change that. From lemon lavender oats to pork belly tacos to ice cream made with avocados and coconut milk, these are just quick snapshots of the Black-owned businesses at the Texas Farmers Market here at Lakeline as well as Miller.
Piper, here you go, Piper.
I've developed a loyal following.
Good girl.
I know my dog's names more than I know some of my customers' names.
That's Geraldine Taylor, the owner of Poochie Trend's Pet Bakery.
I was at the farmers market the day that they started back in 2010. I was one of the first vendors here.
She sold out that day and has been here ever since, serving dogs all natural human-grade ingredients sourced from the farmers market.
Good girl, River. Good girl, River. How you doing, sweet girl?
And as you can see, she has some pretty loyal customers.
My husband and I joke that she would leave us in a heartbeat for Poochie Trends.
So it reminds me of the Caribbean Sea.
Just a few steps away is Naijin Bernard. Like so many, her career trajectory changed when the pandemic hit.
I was part of a corporate downsizing in March 2020. So they gave me a severance package, and I had been working on this business as a side hustle for a couple of years.
So she fully invested in herself and expanded Jeannie's Caribbean Elixirs, bringing a taste of the Caribbean to Austin. She uses local fruits and vegetables from the farmers market, all to recreate her grandmother's recipe, who would make juices daily from scratch.
It shares a story, some nostalgia of grandmothers who, did lots of creative things. They didn't have a lot of education, but they knew what to create in order to create healing.
The two women are part of the fabric that creates a diverse market, one that Executive Director Nana Johnson hopes reflects Central Texas.
Within our sphere, what can we do that's going to actually make an impact? And for us, it's about getting vendors into market.
So they launched a scholarship for vendors of color because they say in this industry, it can be hard to gain access to things like credit and land.
There are, huge barriers, systemic racism barriers that come from all the way down from the USDA for generations now, which is why it makes it harder a lot of times for Black farmers and ranchers to get into the marketplace.
But slowly those barriers are coming down, paving the way to create more space and representation at the Texas Farmers Market. Higher Learning, how one local musician is elevating the history of African Americans and the blues. The east side of Austin had a strong and vibrant blues scene after World War II, and it really had a lasting impact. And now an Austin-based music pioneer has created an innovative curriculum to teach students about the Black contributions and how that impacted the evolution of rock and roll. KXAN's Tahara Rahman takes us to the School of Rock.
I started playing when I was little, and I never really wanted to stop.
Gavin Carney picked up guitar and vocals, but drumming is his first love.
It's not really like anything else. I'm not sure how to describe it.
He's a student here at the School of Rock in Austin.
The focus here is to, not only just teach kids music, but to teach them how to perform together in a room and have a musical conversation.
Like its name indicates, the school teaches rock and roll, but Operations Director Alex Vallejo says they were missing a key piece of education. So they sought Bevis M. Griffin to come up with a Black History Month curriculum. Bevis is a pioneer of glam rock in Texas and made waves in Austin in the 70s.
Austin was a real game changer for me because it literally put me into a community of very high caliber musicians.
He says to understand the roots of rock, you have to go back to the blues.
Blues is essentially like the DNA of rock and roll.
Bevis worked with a professor from George Mason University to put together a blues timeline and set list for the School of Rock.
I mean, we wouldn't even be talking about rock and roll at all without artists like Robert Johnson and Etta James.
First-generation blues that Bevis says inspired later big names based in Austin, like Jimmy Vaughn.
Austin has a unique distinction in the United States as a blues center, as a blues mecca, because of Antone's nightclub that opened up in 1975.
The genre's evolution toward rock is also part of the education.
It didn't start with Elvis Presley and Pat Boone. They were actually covering Black artist songs.
An essential foundation that launched this Black History Month, but will continue at these Austin schools of rock forever.
I think it's made me better just to learn different types of music.
Tahira Rahman, KXAN News.
Making Black history, Noah Fitzgerald. Noah is a senior at Stony Point High School and the founder of Helping Hands. His nonprofit holds donation drives collecting food and water and other items to give to the homeless as well as children at local elementary schools. He travels the state to get donations. The high school senior says the challenges during the pandemic pushed him to find ways to help others.
I felt like I was doing what my purpose was, A lot of people my age aren't blessed with the opportunity to have a purpose this early. I'm just glad that I found a desire that I have, and I'm glad that I'm acting on it.
After 7 years of service at Austin's oldest institution of higher learning, in June, Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett will retire from Houston Tillotson University. During tenure, she initiated a series of new degree programs. HT opened the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. The university also started an MBA program for working individuals. Dr. Burnett solidified and expanded HT's partnership with Apple. The university received global exposure for her passion project, the African American Male Teachers Initiative. Her dedication and love for her students at Austin's only historically Black university is at the core of her work. She was named the 2021 Austinite of the Year by the Austin Chamber of Commerce for her service to the city and courageous leadership. Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett, making Black history. We hope these stories encouraged and inspired you as fellow neighbors work to create change in our community. I'm Jennifer Sanders. Thank you so much for joining me for honoring Black history, mind, body, and soul.